I did pass a point at one stage where someone close to me said, just step off. And I said, absolutely no way, I can't. And you have to, still ignore that voice and just keep focused on the goal of getting over the finish line and becoming an Olympian.
You're very welcome to the Leadership Roots podcast with me, Mark Redmond. And my guest today is a world record-breaking elite athlete. She's also vice president in the aircraft trading and leasing world with Aviation Capital Group. She holds the Irish records for the 50k, 100k and 100-mile distances, and she's the current reigning champion in Europe at the 50k distance. She's also a chartered accountant and a chartered tax advisor. She represented Ireland in London at the 2012 Olympics in the marathon, and she was awarded the accolade of Ultra Runner of the Year 2025, not least because in November of that year, she smashed the world 100-mile record. Now, you may be wondering over how many days did she compete that 100 miles? Well, in fact, she did it all at once. She started at 7 a.m. and crossed the finish line at 7:37 p.m. Small wonder that the Irish Times has said she has an engine unlike the rest of us. Caitríona Jennings, you're very welcome to the Leadership Roots podcast.
Thank you, Mark. I'm delighted to be here.
Caitríona, you're so welcome. And I have to say, when I reflect on what the Irish Times said about the engine, looking at both sides of your career, I think it's an aircraft jet engine they may have been talking about. But I do want to start with that extraordinary achievement from last November of smashing the 100-mile world record. And for me, there's an iconic photograph by Mickey Coulson. It's actually of you crossing the finishing line, but looking at it, you'd imagine you're about to start and you look obviously so happy, but also like you could go again. But I'd love you to take us through what was going through your mind as you crossed the finishing line, as you're at the starting line, and I know 60 miles is a particular milestone in that race. What was going on in your head?
Well, I think when I crossed the finish line, I just had a real sense of euphoria. I was very proud and incredibly grateful because it had been a goal that I was working towards for quite a while, and just actually achieving it was a really momentous occasion for me, and I was very grateful that I was capable of doing it. I think on the start line, strangely, I was incredibly calm and confident. And it's not always a feeling I would have on a start line of a race, but I think on that particular occasion, I knew I had done the work. I knew I had a really good, strong build-up and done exactly what I'd set out to do during that time. And then at the kind of 60-mile mark, again, I think I was feeling quite confident, but just being very positive and patient during those miles, because it was an unknown for me. I had never run more than 60 miles previously, and I wasn't sure what would happen after that. So it was very important for me to just retain that positive mindset, to just know I was to keep doing what I was doing. Everything had gone pretty well until that point. So I knew if I continued that, it should, in theory, continue like that. So I just wanted to remain positive and focused and, just clearly thinking of the goal at hand.
And it's fascinating that you hadn't run 100 miles before you smashed the world record. 60 was as far as you'd run, but yet you say you'd done the work, you were ready. So to a lay person, explain how that works for an elite athlete. You don't actually have to run the full distance before competing in it.
No, and it's similar to a lot of distances, even, the marathon distance. A lot of people would say you don't run the full marathon before the actual marathon itself. It takes an awful lot out of your body to run that amount of miles. And in training, you're trying to layer on a kind of a compounding impact rather than actually going out and doing the entire distance. So I would say in a lot of the races that I had run, or that anyone runs from marathon onwards, you never actually run the distance before the race. So you are fully reliant on knowing that you're prepared appropriately. And that's where I suppose the confidence comes in, where you need to know that you've done what you've set out to achieve, that you followed the programme, that you can tick all the boxes, and that the preparation has been done, because I think that's where you get the confidence from.
I'm interested, Caitríona, in your journey for many reasons, but one is, as I understand it, elite athletes, their journey tends to be, in the early phase, they focus on the sport or the athletics that they're pursuing. They might get a qualification or professional qualification as well, but the sole focus is on their sporting endeavours. And then when that has come to its natural end, they then focus on the professional career. But you've done it simultaneously. You've done a twin track. Was it always planned or did it evolve? And what has been the pluses of that and what has been the minuses of that?
So I think it's something that has absolutely evolved over time. I mean, throughout my entire athletics career, if you like, I also had a professional career running in parallel, starting in the days of PwC, where I was training to be an accountant and then a tax advisor. I had a day job, during the week, and my pastime, if you like, was my running. That evolved then into becoming a bigger part of my life. My running was more important and I was better. I became better and I was becoming more competitive, and then ultimately, qualifying for the Olympics and representing Ireland in the Olympics was clearly a huge goal of mine and a great thing to achieve. But I really had only taken small chunks of time out of work in order to achieve that. I think prior to the Olympics, I had taken about 6 months off to focus on the Olympics, but prior to that, where I would see most of the hard work having been done, and prior to the qualification itself, I was working full time. So I always really was very used to balancing both. And for me, my professional career was also equally as important as my sporting career. So I did find it really difficult to take a step back from that and put those goals on pause while I focused on the sport. So I think I was very used to balancing, and I was able to adapt appropriately when I needed to. Obviously, there were times when I needed to, maybe train a little less because it was very busy in work, and other times when maybe work was a bit quieter, I could focus a bit more on sport. But because that became my life, it wasn't that I'd always planned to continue, but I found it very hard to step back then. So after the Olympics, I did think I would, maybe just continue to focus on my career. And that was my intention. When I went into aircraft leasing first, I really thought I wouldn't have the time or the ability to continue to run at that level. But what happened roughly around the same time as when I went into, private practice was that I started running more ultra races. That maybe is one of the reasons that I was able to continue to be competitive in sport, because I found a way to do a lot of my training at the weekend when I had more free time, and it meant that, I could continue to pursue those goals within my professional career that, as I said, were equally as important to me, but yet not let the athletics side completely die away.
And what has that helped you to do in terms of managing your time, delegating effectively, just being ruthless about how you carve up your day and your week?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head by the word ruthless. I think you have to be so ruthless with your time. I think it has certainly helped me to focus on what I'm doing when I'm doing it. I think there's some phrase about, if you want a job done, give it to a busy person. But I think you can be very effective with your time when you need to. Now, you can't always be effective because, of course, there are times when you need downtime. And I think that's very important, both, when your professional career and your sporting career, it's similar. You can have intense focus, but you also need intense rest. It's the same in training. Never follow 2 hard sessions in the same day. You need to recover from that hard session so that you're capable, that your body has recovered and that you're capable to really go again at your next interval session or your tempo session. I feel in work it's the same. If you're really focused on something and you're really working hard, you need to be able to back off. And I think maybe that's why there's a nice balance between profession and sport, we'll call it, because I can be working really intensely during the day. When I'm then running or in the gym, I'm not trying not to think about work. Like, I'm completely switched off and I'm letting myself get the rest, my brain get the rest that it needs. Similar to them, when I'm working, my body gets the rest it needs because I'm sitting at a desk during the day. I think they actually they work quite well together, and in fact probably help each other.
A nice equilibrium, right?
Yes.
But the thing, Caitríona, is that, and you described running initially as your pastime, But then it became literally a parallel, extraordinarily successful, but extraordinarily demanding undertaking. So here you are, you're in a high pressurized industry, and you're also in a very high pressurized sporting environment. And you talked about the downtime and giving yourself a rest and self-care. What's going on there? Where's the self-care? What do you do to make sure you're actually letting that engine idle for a bit?
Yeah, I mean, if there were more hours in the day. But no, honestly, though, for me, running is self-care.
Okay.
I get it. Like, I'm not always out running hard. I'm not always, running with my heart rate at 180 or something. I do a lot of slow miles, and particularly this is very important for ultra. There are a lot of slow miles where you're just out. It's almost like, I mean, I have been running now since I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something. Like, I've been running so many years that for me a slow run is almost the same as going for a walk. So like, my body is so incredibly used to it, and I do find that gives me so much release of any sort of pressure or issues that I'm having. Like, I always feel so much better after a run. It does give me that downtime, and I do try, maybe at weekends and things, to do other things that I enjoy. Like, I play tennis socially, and, I do make time for visiting family and friends. And I think, those kind of social occasions are really like where I have my downtime.
And if you're playing tennis socially, are you out to smash the opponent?
No, I'm terrible at tennis, which is good.
Which is good for the soul, right?
Good, yeah, it's important.
But for me, I want to, now, if it's okay, just explore that crossover and where one track helps the other, right? And one of my previous guests, and I was really surprised when she said this, she spoke about visualizing success as a business leader. Now, I'd heard that a lot in the sporting world. I haven't heard it too much in the business world or the corporate world, right? Would you first of all mind talking about, as a sports person, how important visualizing success is? And then where can you see it applying maybe for business leaders or aspiring leaders in business?
Sure, it's an interesting concept and absolutely vital in sport. And I do use it myself. It was particularly important for me in the run up to the 100 miles. As I said, it was a distance I hadn't done before. So in order to, I suppose, get my brain ready for the fact that I would be running for 13 hours, I had to, visualize how I would feel, how I was going to feel at the start, how I was going to feel throughout, what I was going to do when issues came or arose during the race that were unexpected, how I would react, and then how I would feel at the finish line. That would be quite a common, I suppose, playbook of how an athlete would prepare for a race. It's vital because I think there's some scientific evidence behind the fact that if you visualize correctly, your brain thinks you've already done it. So when you actually go to do it, it's not an unknown. It feels like it's done it before, so it's capable of getting on and it expects to do it. I haven't personally done it in the corporate world, but I can absolutely see the benefit now that you mention it. I think particularly for things like presentations or, if you're in a meeting where perhaps you're meeting people you haven't met before, or you're presenting on a topic you haven't done before where you might be less comfortable. I think, visualising and almost anticipating what people might ask or things like that. I suppose it's all part of the preparation, but I think it would certainly be equally as beneficial.
You visualised what that 100-mile race was going to be like in your mind. How did it turn out in the actuality? Was it different to what you visualised?
It was different. It was much more positive, actually, which was interesting because I think because I had prepared in my mind for various elements to go wrong, when everything seemed to be going well, it kind of reinforced that positivity for me and made me think that I was nearly doing better than I had expected, which was, again, very positive on the day.
Could you allow yourself to see what's going on around you, or you solely focus on getting to the finishing line?
I was very focused for a lot of it, but I do recall one moment where the sun was setting. It was around 5 p.m, so I'd been running for 10 hours at that stage, and it was autumn in southern Illinois, so the autumn colours were beautiful and the sun was setting on these phenomenal reds and oranges, and I really had a sense of feeling like a very small element in a big world, which was very powerful at the time.
And you keep speaking about your brain and harnessing your brain, right? And clearly in sport, that's just vital. How, again, if I may, Caitríona, for the layperson or for somebody leading an organisation, what advice would you impart about just brain power, managing your brain, controlling what's going on with the rest of you?
Your brain is constantly protecting the body. It's always fighting the unknown or fear. It's trying to protect your body from any sort of vulnerability or threat. So I think we all have, even in a corporate world, we would have a fear. If you're giving a presentation, you have a fear of failure. You have a fear that someone will ask you a question you don't know the answer to, that you're going to stumble on your words. There are so many ways that you can mess up, if you like. And I think controlling that is so powerful, and knowing that you have done the preparation going into that event, call it sport or corporate, that you have prepared for it sufficiently, and particularly your brain, it's very powerful. You get a real confidence from that. And I think that's why one of the reasons I stood on the start line in Tunnel Hill and had that confidence, because I knew I had prepared not just my body but also my brain.
And Tunnel Hill with the 100-mile race, yeah?
Correct, yes.
Again, I want to explore the parallels here, if it's okay. And I'm very conscious that when you are a world record-breaking athlete or record-holding athlete, you're the person people see. It's just you. No one sees the background team. I know every great athlete has a background team, but no one sees them. So all the success is yours and all the failure is yours as well. It tends to be very different when you're a leader of an organisation or leader of a team in a corporate setting or not-for-profit setting. It's all about the team. How do you balance that between being on the front page, smashing a 100-mile world record, and then being with your team in the leasing world?
Well, I'm very fortunate in that I have an amazing team. I really enjoy working with all of them, and I think everyone on the team that I work with is just so incredibly focused, and everyone puts in a huge amount of effort and work, and we all genuinely work towards a common goal. But it comes from the top, and I think perhaps the equivalent is the CEO of a company. When a company does really well and issues the report at the end of the year, it's the CEO that's really, taking the credit is probably the wrong word, but it's the CEO whose name is up on lights. And, it's the team that's all fed up into that, and the CEO will always recognise the team. I think perhaps it's more visual because we know that a CEO has a team behind them. In sport, perhaps people may not, unless you're involved in the world of sport, you may not realise the extent to which there is a team behind every successful athlete or team. So I feel I'm very happy to balance both. I think even within the team, people have, so the role that I have, for example, I would lead smaller teams within the organisation, deal teams we call it, because we might be selling an aircraft. We need to form a deal team around that. Everyone has a role within the team. Ultimately, we're all working towards the same goal. But because I'm the person that's dealing with the counterparty, if it all blows up, it will land on my shoulders effectively. So, it's probably at a lower level within the organisation, but still same concept.
And how do you manage this one? Because you set incredibly high standards for yourself when it comes to running. How do you make sure you don't set impossibly high standards for the people you're working with? Is that a challenge?
Well, honestly, in my current role, I think everyone works to the same high standards that I work to. In my past, I have come across, yes, of course, different people have different standards that they set for themselves. I sometimes can find it difficult to work with people that don't have that same level of, I guess, drive, ambition, and making sure everything is kind of perfect. And I am aware that perfect can't be the enemy of good at times, but I suppose it depends on the person and the situation. In times in the past, I have maybe given some feedback to people that I know will respond well to it. Other times I just accept that I think the person is doing their best, and for them, that's fine for them. But I think I've quite a good sense of self-awareness as well, that I do know that I have these high goals, and I try to moderate it, and I check myself to make sure that I'm not requesting things that are just outrageous from people that are doing their best.
And that's incredibly powerful. You do that, right? And that, I think, speaks to self-awareness of yourself, right? But I'm wondering, Caitríona, when you get the highs of smashing world records, holding world records, do you look for similar highs in the workplace?
Not to the same extent. I have goals for myself within both. I can compartmentalise quite well. I think I do have a distinction between what I expect from myself in sport and what I expect from myself professionally. I feel like I'm a realistic person. I know my strengths and weaknesses, and I can see gaps where, maybe professionally I know there's still work to do, where I need to get to. I think I probably have higher expectations from myself in the sporting world, perhaps because I've been in it longer, really, over the entire term. But also maybe when you're relying fully on yourself, you can be more critical and harder on yourself than you might be on a team.
Yeah, and again, I'm guessing that's checking in with yourself on a regular basis, right?
Yes.
Can I read something to you that I came across recently? It's from a book I read. We find it extraordinary that nobody would ever think of putting a world-class athlete onto the field or into the Olympic Games without a coach. Yet they do it every day in business. Now, I know over your athletics career you've had coaches, and there's times when you haven't had coaches. I'd love you to talk to me about the difference for you in those two scenarios. And then, what do you make of that phrase? Do you think there's some truth in that if it's good for sport, surely it should be good for anywhere where someone is expected to show leadership?
For sure, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And certain careers can be quite structured and already evident where you're going to end up. Other careers can be so broad that, I think a coach would certainly help, because maybe it's just someone to bounce ideas off. So, for example, in my sporting career, as you mentioned, I've had coaches. I haven't had coaches. Coaches are, you can't underestimate the value, because especially I think as a young athlete that you're not really sure where you're going or where your talent is even. Often a coach can see something in you that you wouldn't see in yourself and lead you towards that, which is incredibly powerful. Also, in times when I haven't had a coach, I've always had someone that I was able to bounce ideas off and get their thoughts on. In a way, it could be just expressing it out loud, and I possibly have made the decision myself, but I need to just go through that thought process and make sure that is the correct role or, road for me, and that I'm not kind of, checking in to make sure what my idea isn't completely off the wall. So similar in your professional world, particularly when, as I said, if your career isn't very structured, the benefit of having someone to just bounce the ideas off, or as a younger person, maybe just knowing like where your talents are or where you're, sometimes you mightn't even be aware of what opportunities are out there unless someone that's, that bit more experienced can share with you and help you to get there. I think it's incredibly powerful.
And did any of your athletic coaches get frustrated about your professional commitments?
Well, only on one occasion. I had a brief interlude in running where I started rowing. It was after the Olympics, and I had stress fractures in both feet. My body was just in a mess. I really needed a break from running. I started rowing. My sister is also an Olympian. She went to Rio in 2016 for rowing. So I said, you know what, maybe I'll jump in a boat and see how that goes. It actually went relatively well. I was down training in the National Rowing Centre in Cork with the Irish team, and I was working at the same time. I was balancing it. It was more difficult with rowing because it's very time consuming. But I was running everywhere. I actually literally used to run to the boat to get it out and then run to the water with the boat. And I was talking to the coach one day and she said to me, if you don't have time to walk or to eat properly, you don't have time to row. So that was very much an eye-opener for me, because for me, I always wanted to just fit everything in, and you rushed a bit more and you made more time. Other than that, no, I've never had anyone tell me. And in fact, I have had coaches say to me that they think that I work best when I am busy and I have my career as well. I actually personally think that's true, because it takes a huge amount of some of the pressure off the performance, knowing that if I'm running a race and, for example, if there's big prize money on the line, it doesn't matter to me if I get the prize money or not. I don't need to win to, get a sponsor or get prize money. I know I'm comfortable in what I'm doing already. So in a way, it does take some of the pressure off. But equally then, of course, it takes away your time, and it's more difficult to train 100%. You do have to sacrifice part of training in order to balance your career too. So I think there's probably a little bit of balance there that
but you
works.
You self-coached. I'm fascinated by, you had coaches for athletics, right, and running, etc. You had probably mentors on your journey over, tax advisory and aircraft leasing and so on. But did you have that one person who was advising you, coaching on both, and how they join up?
No.
And how do you feel about that now? You're grand without it?
I think I'm fine because it worked out.
If you're starting again...
If I was starting again, I think, maybe it's something that would actually be very helpful.
Mm.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've never thought of it. I didn't even think, maybe someone would have the capability of advising on both. For me, they were always very separate. But that's actually fascinating.
Yeah, but you're highly successful in doing both. But it just struck me, you'd one, coaching on one aspect,
yes, but
not consistent on the other. But it's worked out fine, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry about this, but you raised stress fractures, so I'm going to have to bring you back to 2012.
Yes.
And here you are representing your country in the Olympics and the marathon. I mean, the preparation you put in, unreal, loved ones in the stadium, in the city, and then 5 to 6 miles in, a stress fracture happens. But you finish the marathon, and you subsequently said, now this is a while ago, you finished it, but you felt embarrassed and ashamed, which I thought was extraordinary to say that. Talk to us about how you feel about it now, Caitríona, and what conversation did you have with yourself at that 5 to 6 mile mark?
Well, I can look back at it now, and I am incredibly proud that I finished, and I'm so glad that I stuck with it. And ultimately, the goal was so etched in my mind that I had to finish, that to me, it didn't really matter how I was going to get there. Even if I had to walk, I was going to get there. At the time, it was very difficult because I knew I was in really good shape. I was actually in much better shape than I had been for the qualifying race, and I was expecting the performance of my life. I was wearing the Irish vest. I was achieving my dream. I was running in the Olympics in front of what will probably be the closest to a home Olympics Ireland will ever have. And it just all came crumbling down, and it was just so devastating. I did feel ashamed and embarrassed at the time because I was wearing the Irish vest and I was representing the country and I was running so badly. For me, it was really difficult to hear the cheering and the encouragement, because in my mind, I didn't deserve it. I understand this all sounds bizarre, but that's, the feeling that I had at the time. And I did pass a point at one stage where someone close to me said, just step off. And I said, absolutely no way, I can't. And, in a way that was even more difficult to hear, because you're running on your own with all this trauma in your head. And then suddenly you start thinking, gosh, is that what people think I should do? And you have to, still ignore that voice and just keep focused on the goal of getting over the finish line and becoming an Olympian.
I find it incredible. And, you have demonstrated two things there that I think are so valuable for us to hear. you had a time in your head when you're visualizing that marathon. 5-6 miles in, you realize, I'm not going to make that time. But you didn't give up. You recalibrated your goal. You said, okay, now it's to get across the line, and that time that I had in the past is gone. But the second thing you've done is you totally reframed the experience from one of shame and embarrassment to one of pride and achievement. And I think they're very powerful pieces. Do you feel that yourself?
I do. And, in a way, I feel like if I had have stepped off, I feel I would have found it difficult to turn it into a positive, because I would have failed. Whereas, although it wasn't in the manner in which I had hoped to finish, I still finished and I still achieved that goal. So, yeah, I think it is powerful to realise that maybe the road to the ultimate goal may not, and often doesn't, go as planned. If you can keep your sight on the goal and still work towards it and ultimately achieve it if it's possible, then that is quite powerful.
And recognise what you're capable of in that moment. You had in this moment, I'm capable of getting across that line.
Yes.
But not in the distance. But also that brain, that preparation of the brain. You had that voice from the external voice asking you to quit, but your brain talked to you and said, no, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Very powerful, isn't it?
It is.
And is that the vibe you have now today, Caitríona? Is that the learning you've taken with you from 2012?
So I haven't ever broken it down in that way. So that's actually a very interesting way to think about it. But I know it took me so long. I mean, I couldn't talk about the Olympics for about, I'd say, at least 7 or 8 years. My sister went to the Olympics in Rio. I would have loved to have gone to support her. I just didn't think I'd be capable of putting myself into that environment because it was so traumatic for me. So yeah, like, it took me a long, long time to work through it. And, in hindsight, I should probably have sought help. Perhaps in my mind there was some sort of a stigma about it. I'm not really sure why I didn't lean into it and actually avail of the services that are there for that reason. But and maybe that is the one learning that I would have from it, that, you do need to sometimes look externally, and you can't always rely on yourself, because while you might get there, ultimately it's just going to prolong a process of processing, if you like, where you could actually just seek professional help, which would get you there much quicker. And ultimately that's what I should have done. But at least I managed to ultimately get there myself a long time later. And yeah, I suppose it is nice to have almost turned the view of it for myself into a positive, out of something that I had held as being a negative experience for a long time.
And how did you get there? What changed that movie in your head?
Strangely, I think it was when I turned to ultra running, and a friend of mine actually said to me after I had run the marathon, and he really wanted to encourage me to do ultra running for a long time. He said, well, now we know you're going to be a good ultra runner, because we knew you had the engine, and now we know you have the head state, or the head for it. Because ultra running is a lot about, fighting those demons, or the difficult things that might pop up during a race that are unexpected. So I think I ran my first ultra in 2015, but which was a 50k. But what I would consider was my real first ultra was in 2019, when I ran the Comrades Marathon in South Africa. It's a 90k race from point to point, and it is grueling because there is so much elevation gain and loss, and nothing could have expected me for how hard it was. But I was having an amazing race. I ran it perfectly for the first half. I was probably running in around 12th place, and I started feeling really good, and I just started passing all the girls. Ended up running in second place for most of the second half until 10 kilometres in the end, when everything just went terribly and my quads were cramping. I was just completely out of fuel. It was a novice error, and I went too hard too soon. But it was probably one of the most difficult things, but I managed to get myself back running. I did lose one spot, but I still managed to get to the end, and I was third place, and I was on the podium. And this is quite a prestigious race, so it was really, I was so proud of myself that I had, dug in and gotten the best out of myself, and managed to overcome that awful obstacle towards the end to still manage to finish on the podium. And I think that was quite a transformative moment for me, where I realised that maybe my inner strength and ability to overcome those very difficult situations is actually one of my strengths. And then it kind of made me rethink about the way I dealt with London, and realise that actually, and of course a lot of time had passed because this was 2019 and I had run London in 2012, but I think it made me realise that, yeah, this is who I am and this is one of my strengths. So lean into it and realise that maybe ultra running is now the future for me. And I may not have realised that was a road for me unless London had gone badly and that one friend had planted a seed that ultimately led to this.
Which must have been so enhanced when you're wearing your Letterkenny AC colours
Yeah.
back in November, smashing the 100-mile world record. So you have so many incredible moments now that I think rebalance London 2012.
For sure.
Caitríona, before I ask you for your book recommendation, right, I'm going to one final question. And again, I want to read this. It's something you said previously, right? You said, I would like other women to see what I'm doing and realise that it's achievable. Now, I thought an awful long time about that quote. I was kind of imagining women across Ireland going, just popping out for my 60-mile run, darling. But that's not, I think, what you're saying. What are you saying?
I'm saying that you can have a goal which seems completely unrealistic and unreasonable, but provided it's something that you're very passionate about and that it's a very clear goal and you know exactly why you want to achieve that goal, that you can do it. You just need to know exactly what it is, identify a pathway of getting there, and then going out and executing.
So it's the value of having goals, and I think it's also the value of that mental belief in yourself that you'll actually achieve those goals.
Exactly. And putting in the work. You have to be willing to put in the work.
Love it. Caitríona, have you a book recommendation that you'd share with us about leadership or leaders or...
So, Mark, I don't read a lot of leadership books, I must admit. I'm much more into sports autobiographies and things like that. But a book that really sticks out in my mind is something which was had a huge impact on me at the time I read it, which was years, maybe 15 years ago. And I think it's actually quite relevant to both sport and business, is Nelson Mandela's A Long Walk to Freedom. It really struck me at the time how his goal was just such an important and crucial part of his life, that he was able to sacrifice so much to achieve it. And I think it really shows how much resilience, clarity of the goal and, the amount of sacrifice that he was willing to make to get there. And for me, it really struck a chord. And I think that's something that, is probably applicable across both.
It's a fantastic recommendation. Caitríona, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you so much. I'm going to try and summarise a few takeaways I'm bringing. And I would say the importance of having goals that you believe in and mapping the pathway to achieving those goals, believing in yourself. Doesn't matter what those goals are. They're the right goals for you and what you have in the tank at the time. But also being able to pivot. When life throws stuff at you, being able to pivot on those goals, recalibrate, and having no shame in that, celebrating that for what it is, right? I think thirdly also making sure that self-care can take many forms. And for some people, a really all-in active pastime, as you call it, can be great self-care, provided you mind yourself and you check in on yourself on those occasions. And fourthly, getting that balance right between high expectations of yourself, high standards for yourself, and bringing people with you. Caitríona, thank you so much. And I can't wait to see what you do next. So, folks, that's the end of this episode of Leadership Roots. I hope you have enjoyed it. And if you have, I'd be grateful if you could, wherever you get your podcasts, please to rate it, review it, repost it, and like it. Huge thanks to the production team on sound, Blessing Coure, and series producer, Jonathan de Burka Butler. Until the next episode of Leadership Roots from me, Mark Redmond, stay safe and well. Bye.